Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of Backseat Designers Season V.
Your Virginia Capers impression
Sorry.
isn't very good, Gareth.
No, sorry. It's 8 a.m. here, and for some fucking reason, I am here with Frederick Olsen.
As the great Al Lowe once said, good morning. That was the last thing he said, by the way.
What, is he dead now?
No, it's just that any interview with Al Lowe that involves trolls ends up getting cut off very, very quickly. That also is the sound of Trolls Plymouth.
Eat pant.
Eat pant indeed. And today, the reason that I am up at this ungodly hour is that we have yet another, yes, there is more than one, Australian guest. Welcome, Daniel Stacey. How you doing, Dan?
I'm very, very well, and pleased to be the only person in this session that did not talking to you at an ungodly hour. It's actually almost 1 o'clock here, so this should get very interesting.
Okay, well, if you're willing to carry the show, then I think this should be good.
Yeah, see ya.
And then all the backseat designers went back to bed, and Dan just monologued for himself for an hour.
Just press pause. I'll have a couple of glasses. We'll resume. It'll be fine.
So, Dan, we wanted to talk to you today about remakes, about Sierra, about King's Quest, about a whole bunch of things. But you kind of got into adventure games through, was it Tierra? Was that the company you were involved with?
At the time, it was called Tierra, yes. And for obvious reasons, that name didn't fly with whoever was owning Sierra at the time.
I can't
Come on, Dan. You're just ashamed that it's almost Tiara, and you hadn't thought of that.
Actually, that would be great. I would have loved to come visit Daniel just wearing a nice tiara.
Tiara Dan is the best Dan.
The first time I visited Dan, I borrowed his little sister's nail polish, to the astonishment of everyone around me. And
because, I mean, going back a bit, I guess the real reason that Dan is here, apart from being involved with, now it's Himalaya Studios rather than Tierra. But the real reason you're here, Dan, is that you and Trolls go back quite a long way.
Is that really?
Yeah, I was going to do that wavy, but it doesn't work on audio. No.
It worked fine. I'm transported back already. I feel mopey. I listen to a lot of Slipknot, and I alienate everyone around me. I'm a teenager again.
Oh, it's 1997. I had a flashback. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. 1997, which is a long way, in my world. But you guys used to, speaking of remakes, you guys were quite into adapting stuff for other media. Like, you guys wrote Space Quest novelizations, isn't that right?
That is a point of
he doesn't remember
in my heart, because it no longer exists.
That's true. I lost it. There's that story. Daniel wrote an entire novelization of Space Quest 2 where he did the same thing that we're going to talk about later in this episode, where he took a game that practically had no story to speak of and made it brilliant and engaging and narratively interesting. And he sent all these chapters via email. Now, you have to remember, this is back in 1998. 97 or 98, somewhere along those lines. And email was in its infancy, I almost want to say.
It wasn't really email as from the early 80s, but for dramatic effect, surely.
Right. Let's just say...
And the cloud was still very much, a cloud.
Yeah, it was very much it was a cloudless sky back in those days. So
yeah, actually, we still had clouds. Now we have climate change. It was a simpler time.
Anyway, the story goes, he sent all of these chapters by email, and back then email was stored locally on your computer. It wasn't stored in the cloud. So
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Yes. Guess who lost about 100 pages of brilliance? This old jackass.
Hey.
Cheers.
I'll accept the compliment. They come few and far between these days, so I'll just take it.
But But yeah, it turns out that taking a game that didn't really have much narrative going for it was something that you weren't done with, because when Himalaya was Tierra and you did your first remakes, one of the real challenges that you did, Dan, was remake King's Quest II, which is a game that has so shoddy a narrative that it has the Batmobile in it. So I'm curious how you map that out.
Besmirch the name of good Roberta Williams.
and Batman, not to mention.
I'm sorry about Batman. I'm not sorry in the slightest about Roberta.
It just sounds like Fred just said that every piece of fiction that has the Batmobile in it is shit by default.
Batman Williams.
we actually did use that. I think we put a different Batmobile in that as an Easter egg. I think we actually duplicated that. Yeah.
But I'm curious as to how you got started on that project. Knowing full well that it's ages ago. How did you map out what you were going to do with that very skeletal story?
My plan, being the lazy person I am, was not to do much, and just to write a like an intro, a little bit, middle bit, and a bit at the end, so like a bookend plot. So a bit of plot at the beginning, bit of the plot at the end, and a little bit in the middle. And then Chris and Brittany, who were in charge at the time, went, "Hey, yes, that's great. Write more." So I just sporadically looked at different parts and just sort of went, well, okay, how could that be different? And I won't say better. How could that be a different experience?
You can say better. Together.
Yeah, well, you can definitely say better, because one of the praises, the universal praises that Tierra's King's Quest II remake always gets is you turned a shit game into a wonderfully playable game.
Yes, and I actually think you did. You took a game that was certainly below par, even for Sierra at the time, plot-wise, and turned it into something that plays pretty much as good as King's Quest 6, which is universally held at the pinnacle of the series, which 7 isn't.
Given that I'm British, I feel like I should put my BBC voice on and give some balance here. One could say that you took a game that was from the infancy of the graphic adventure genre and updated it towards modern sensibilities.
That was good.
Gee whiz. I like that. Wow.
And it's isn't it like from, wasn't that project from like 2002 or something? So it was actually modern sensibilities at the time. We had barely moved on to widescreen.
Written in... Yeah, well, I hadn't. Written in 2001, I think, and it came out in 2002. Modern sensibility. Well, I suppose it had to be, really, because it was almost 20 years later when we did it. I don't know. I suppose I was just trying to think about what the different elements that were in the original game and how they would actually all fit together. So how would you have a vampire in a castle and Little Red Riding Hood roaming around and I think there was a dwarf in there somewhere. All that kind of stuff.
I like that.
And a snake that turns into Pegasus, which you actually made a semblance of sense of, I would argue. So very good job. I mean, that everyone else would have thought that impossible.
Can someone explain that to me, please? And I would love to hear Daniel explain this to me. How does the original puzzle work, and how does the revamped sense-making puzzle work?
Of which one, sorry?
Of the bridle and the snake thing, because that thing gets brought up all the time when people look at nonsensical puzzles. They always look to the bridle and the snake, mainly because it's such a weird phrase to type into a parser. And I mean, having never played King's Quest 2.
And it's, to be fair, it's a weird phrase in any context. Like, if I were to shout, throw bridle on snake in a sexual context, I'm pretty sure that would not go down well either.
I think you like it.
Don't say to your mother you have seen this.
And there he was. First Fiat Soper of the day, ladies and gentlemen.
Like literally the first. It is very, very early for Fiat Soper.
It's never too early for Fiat Soper. But yes, Daniel.
I'm thinking of an answer to try to get how do we make that make sense? Probably without remembering, I would imagine it was probably something to do with the descriptors. The descriptors weren't there weren't that many of them in the original version, so that meant I tried to keep as many as possible, which wasn't that much. So I just had to fill out a lot of stuff, and I think that's where you add all the different clues and hints in descriptors. So I'm guessing that's what we did. Maybe.
All right. Now, I was literally wondering, having never played the game, what is the deal with the throw bridle on Snake? Why does the main character do that in King's Quest II, the original? And what was the narrative reason for him doing it in your remake? How did you make that make sense?
Who actually remembers the game, Fred, is going to have to remind me what it's about.
Well, I don't think there's actually any logic to it in the original game. And you know, people listening to this may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's just a lot of trial and error. You know, you're standing there with this angry snake that you have to pass, and you just try to use your inventory on it. In all fairness, and I'm guessing here, I would guess that use bridle on Snake would elicit the same response, or at least elicit a hint that you need to throw it. But I don't think there's any reason given in the game. There might be a narrative reason given in one of the novelizations that came out, but you know how those works. I mean, Roberta had a very interesting grasp on logic that may or may not have been influenced by that.
Libel alert.
Nah.
It's basically common knowledge that
we are so gonna put in a libel alert for that one.
No.
Okay.
Well, last time I checked, Roberta Williams is still with us, so she's won.
Well, she didn't as other people. But anyway, I, to answer your question, I don't really think there is a narrative reason for it in the original. So how did you flesh it out in the remake, Dan?
I am trying to remember. I'm wondering if there was a visual clue with the snake and some sort of connecting visual clue between the snake and the.
I think that this is always the problem when you go back and you talk about a game that's like more than 15 years old.
Yes.
Like, what did you think when you wrote that? Well, Jesus, fuck, what did I think at the time? But I looked it up on YouTube this morning, you know, in preparation, just because I didn't actually remember that clearly. I just remember that when I first played it back in the day, I just thought, okay, now it makes some sort of sense. And I'm not sure. I think the Let's Player who did the video I watched may have skipped over a few of the descriptors and look events and some such. But the snake is near the Enchanter's Cave. And when you walk into that, you can look at a book that gives you a recipe for like this green emerald with which you can break a spell if you shine the rays of the sun through it. And you whip up this emerald from some of your inventory items and you go light up the snake, which is a thing I never thought I'd say, and it turns into Pegasus.
You like it.
Hey, it worked for Indiana Jones, so you know, light them up.
I'm guessing there is a hint somewhere that the enchanter is responsible for transforming Pegasus into a snake. And I mean, if I remember correctly, there is. I certainly remember there being one, and I wouldn't put it beyond you.
I do remember trying really hard to connect everything, you know, and trying to give a reason for everything to be there. One of the reasons why there was a town in that game, I'm remembering now, is because I wanted a reason for Graham to care about the environment and that there is a population there and it's worth fighting for. And so, you know, there's a logic to it. Yeah.
Because in the original, it's basically a wasteland. Like there's a witch and there's Batman for some reason and a princess in a tower, and that's about it.
Yeah, no, I think I seem to recall I got quite stuck into I got hooked onto the Society of the Black Cloak thing reference from King's Quest VI,
Yes,
you don't
that was
actually have
another.
to encounter. And I just thought, yeah, that can be the basis for this thing. Yeah.
That was another thing I wanted to bring up because on a wider scale, you did a lot of work to tie the games together because you basically fleshed out this Society of the Black Cloak into an organization that is trying to orchestrate the downfall of King Graham. And it ties into all the other games. And you even worked King's Quest 8 in there by having Connor in the flash forward, which I thought
that was one of the fun things to write. One of the options you got in there, the madness of King Graham. And the fact that we actually got the original voice actor to do that was awesome.
Yeah,
the owl, I mean.
Yeah, for those of you not in the know, and I think Daniel related this to Trolls and I when we met, but of course drinks were had. But basically, there's a flash forward there's a flash forward in the middle of the game where, King Graham flashes back to his past, and he flashes forward to the not too distant future and the distant future.
Seems like a boomerang flashback.
You were alcoholic.
Yes, we absolutely were.
But sort of like okay, King Graham thinks back to his past, wherein he is kind of forced to think back. It's like this flashback.
No, it's a trial.
Flash forward. It's a trial.
It's one from the past, one from the not quite present, like just in the not too distant future.
Right, in 2 days.
King's Quest 3 or something, and then flash forward to post Mask of Eternity.
And it's basically, how would you react? Are you worthy? How is your moral fiber? That kind of thing.
That's right. Which when you're writing that, you become very much aware that you're really sharing with your audience your own sense of morality, and you're hoping that it flies.
A questionable sense of morality.
I like that the ghost of King's Quest past, present, and future. That's I mean, it's surprising. I love how blasé you are about it, Daniel. Well, I just looked at this thing and thought, you know what, it needs something to hold it together, so I just wrote that. It's just.
I guess that's kind of the challenge of talking about this kind of craft. I mean, I get the same from music. I'll play back something I've done for people, and they'll be, "My God, how did you do this?" And just fingered my guitar, which is actually another thing I never thought I'd say, but there you have it.
That was better.
I'm thinking of one of my favourite shows, and Fred's too, Doctor Who. Stephen Moffat, the previous showrunner, the fans would get really thinking about, the Doctor running out of regenerations. What are you going to do? How's he going to? He's running out of lives, and he said, "Well, we'll just make something up." That's it.
Yep.
That's what Doctor Who did, and was that kind of an inspiration to you? The way Doctor Who would just make shit up to circumvent plot holes and low budgets?
I think that's how you do it anyway, isn't it? I mean, you use that same strategy when you go into an interview.
Yep, he's got us pegged.
Really.
It's what we do anyway.
Yep.
But yeah, the madness of King Graham, we went on quite a bit, but can you just explain briefly what goes on during that scene and why it's so funny?
Just because I don't think there are too many King's Quest fans out, if there are any still alive. I don't think there are any King's Quest fans out there who didn't think the owl was incredibly annoying, and I just thought that would be a funny way of giving them an opportunity to seeing Graham attempt to chop its head off.
Now you've sold this game to me. Now I really want to play it. I just want to lob that little fucker's head off.
I believe he does it off screen, but yeah.
As long as had Josh Mandel voice King Graham, of course, but also Richard Aronson voicing Cedric the Owl.
Yes, that was a lovely thing for him to come and do, and he did not need to do that. And he did it for free, as did Josh Mandel as well.
I have it on
very giving man to the adventure game community.
Josh is a very lovely man, and I do have it on good authority that Richard Aronson would love to fricassee the little fucker. The owl, not Josh Mandel.
That's an important distinction.
Yes.
And we actually had Josh Mandel on the Space Quest Historian podcast reprising his role as King Graham, and we tried to get Rich Aronson to do a Cedric voice to complement Frederick's amazing Cedric impersonation that he did on that season of the show. And we couldn't quite get it to work in time, but we actually had this whole plot line of the real Cedric confronting Frederick's Cedric and going, I'm the real Cedric. No, I'm the real Cedric. Sadly, we couldn't get it to work in time.
That's what the King's Quest series needs. We need a spin-off called Cedric.
Just Cedric, a dark reboot.
he just has this really posh apartment in Seattle, and his brother keeps coming round. And
more sherry, Cedric.
Dark and gritty Cedric.
Oh dear God. Okay, so I guess to sort of give this some context, the whole impetus for bringing you on, Dan, to do writing for the King's Quest remakes, what was the reason behind that? Back then, these were the anonymous game developers, right?
Yes, yes. So they were when I first encountered them, as one can encounter someone in the virtual world.
Was anonymous.
Exactly.
Do they have a Skype?
They had. They were doing their King's Quest 1 remake, and I ran into that and offered to beta test it. So I was one of the beta testers for that, and that's when I came up with the idea of, well, yes, this is great, but you could do a bit more, surely. And that's how it came along to doing King's Quest 2. Yeah, and doing a more than just a one-to-one remake.
So it was basically a case of you handing in beta test notes of going, hey, you could do more with this, this, and this bit, and them going, well, you fucking do it.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
So
it
King's
was
Quest,
just like, just being in the right place, right time, really.
What were some of the challenges that you noted because surely you sat down, and I realize this is a long time ago, but surely you sat down with the original King's Quest 2, and as you mentioned, you kind of started getting ideas about how to tie all this together. But what were some of the challenges that you encountered? Like, how do you tie Red Riding Hood together with Dracula?
Yeah, no, that was interesting. I'm just remembering going through the original game and just again, I think it was in Haggith's cave. She had a black cloak in the original version, hanging up on the cave wall, and I went, "Oh, that's good. I'll use that." And that's where I think that's where I made that connection. But the challenges were, oh gosh, I think one of the big ones was early on. We're trying to make in the original the King Triton. There was just a Triton lying on the beach in the original, and you had to go into the water and find him and give it to him or something. And I thought, hey, well, what can you do with that? And so I just turned it into a whole massive programming nightmare. involving our chase sequence and all this sort of stuff.
It's basically okay. I'm gonna write this game for you guys. Sure. Thank you so much for bringing me on board. Now eat this, motherfuckers.
Yeah. What was the? I'm curious if you remember what the response was when you brought some of this stuff, which not only fleshes out on King's Quest 2, but expands a lot on it. I mean, Chris and Brittany must have been quite fascinated by what they'd gotten themselves into, because the King's Quest 1 remake is very, very faithful to the original. Like, it's basically a visual and a sonic update, but you went above and beyond the Call of Duty. What did they think of what you were doing with this plot?
Well, they kept asking me to write more, so it's probably a good sign. Or they were just being mean. I don't know.
Yeah, let's see how much he'll do for free.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's not go there. No, I was just. I think I'm remembering. At the time, I didn't know how to write a design document, and quite frankly, I still don't. I made up my own version. But at the time, I didn't know how to do it, so I just approached it the way I would normally approach any kind of writing, and just wrote it as a kind of a short novel. And so it just grew as a narrative with sporadically written chapters all over the place. But and then a lot of what ended up in the final game was conversations and things that were directly lifted out of out of what I'd written, and we went through I don't know how many drafts. But yeah, it went backwards and forwards, and I'd write something in, and Chris usually would write back with a whole heap of notes, and I'd write more. And it would just bounce backwards and forwards, and it'd get more and more convoluted.
Well, that's interesting. That's the Aaron Connors school of game design, which is basically we're going to make a game. I'll just write a novel, and then we can just copy and paste things wholesale from it. That's I mean, I don't know any other designers who quite work like that, but when Aaron Connors does a Tex Murphy game, he basically sits down and writes the novel first, and then they sort of build the game around that. And
I think if you've got keep the narrative at the forefront, and that drives everything else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious as to whether you had mapped out the puzzles at that stage, because I read the Gabriel Knight novels a couple of years ago, and in the first one there is a scene, I can't remember which specific puzzle there is, but there is one specific scene where Gabriel kind of gives up on the investigation of the voodoo murders, and he goes to lie down in the park, and something just appears magically in his mind, maybe you should try this, and there is no reason at all for it, and it's so contrived that you can tell that, okay, this is basically a trial and error thing that Jane Jensen had to put down in the novel, and she had to give Gabriel a reason for it. I'm curious as to whether the puzzles came later, or whether you actually went through this narrative thinking, what would be a logical reason for King Graham to try this?
I have a feeling that when I was writing it, and then we had got to a bit where there needed to be a puzzle, I probably just wrote in brackets, insert puzzle here. But I also have a feeling that when you start to make changes to an established game structure, and you have a different inventory there, and that's used for something else, then once you've changed one thing, it breaks something else. So you have to go and fix that. And once you fix that, it breaks something else, and you have to go and fix that. So it's just domino effect.
So you kind of prioritized narrative over the puzzles then? It was more about being able to tell a good story, and the kind of the puzzles develop out of the narrative.
I think that has to be always, with adventure games, I think that's got to be the absolute reason. Some people would argue that the narrative should go around the puzzle solving, but with adventure games, if you're not telling a story, then what are you doing?
I don't know. Let's ask Roberta.
I do think that's worthy of applause, actually, because one of the things we harp on a lot on the show, and we've actually sort of forgotten this season, is adventure games being a logical step forward in terms of the art of storytelling.
Yeah, I haven't even name dropped Aristotle, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
Aristophanes of Los Angeles.
I will say that you can take that too far. And as much as I love all the longest journey Dreamfall stuff, especially with the Dreamfall chapters that came out, when you push the narrative way in front and you don't do any interaction, then you're just sitting there watching a cartoon.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, I played Life is Strange, the prequel, Before the Storm, which is basically just a machinima with a couple of dialogue tree puzzles that do practically nothing. It's just sort of injected in between cutscenes.
Yeah. I think, and you're talking about the puzzles. I mean, they've got to feel kind of, natural and organic, and you feel like you're doing them to advance the plot, and you're not just being kept busy. Having said that, I have designed lots of puzzles which is specifically to keep the player busy. So guilty.
So what would you say, going back to King's Quest 2, VGA, what would you say is your favorite puzzle that you introduced or fleshed out, and your least favorite, if you have a preference at all?
This is based on having no idea what the game was originally, because I'm still trying to remember it.
Well, again, I'm the only one who's played it, and it's like 17 years ago or something.
My favorite part, I think, because I like vampires at the time. Before Twilight came out.
Obviously, you're a good friend of trolls.
He made me watch a vampire movie last time I was there.
You rang.
Yeah. And I think I enjoyed the whole castle redesign and redoing that. That was a bit of fun. The whole werewolf thing, because that was a brand new element.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Never has that sample been more appropriate.
Brilliantly chosen and well timed.
Well done. So moving on to other things that I haven't played. After King's Quest 2 came out, and I assume was a great success. I mean, again, rave reviews across the board. I don't know if that was a slow burn.
We made millions. We made millions on those free downloads.
Yes, I would imagine. Yes.
It's going to have to explain to me how that works after the show.
Wait, it was like a license print money.
Millions of imaginary money. Yeah.
You know, that's how the Australian economy works. I don't know if we should really be looking to there.
Trolls have seen it. Trolls have seen it. It's all magic. You go up into a little machine and you hold the card over the machine, and it just goes boom. You paid it. It's still magic.
But you're not spending a lot of time on it, because every other week in Queensland, someone gets attacked by a crocodile.
Thieving cunts owe me money.
That's a better accent than mine.
I have the idea that Trolls tried to move us on from Dracula and this is very old wine, it's fermented in the bottle, onto King's Quest 3, which fairly logically you guys made after King's Quest 2. Did I say Space Quest? I meant King's Quest. It's early in the morning, leave me alone.
You said King's Quest, but yeah. Okay. I just wanted to interject. I think that's why Australian customs are so strict, because they're afraid you're going to bring in, Western capitalism. It has nothing to do with fruits and veg and frogs and anything. It's just no.
And it'll never be in a bundle. I'll tell you that now. It'll never be in a bundle.
It has always been celebrated for its excellence.
Wow. See, this is what happens when you get us up at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, you basically get Bella Lugosi. I have lost many relationships to that early morning spiel. But King's Quest 3.
Again, your sexual proclivities, man. We should not get into those.
Pull the string.
Now get on to rest and get on the bed. No, I'm leaving. Sorry, yes, King's Quest 3. Hi, Dan. You still with us?
I'm just enjoying the ride. Carry on.
No, so was there like an immediate celebration of the excellence that was the King's Quest 2 remake, and was that a motivation to go on to King's Quest 3, or was that always part of the plan?
My brains dropped into my feet during the making of King's Quest 2, and I thought, let's do the next one. That's pretty much what happened.
Which was actually interesting because it had already been done. Infamous Quests, then Infamous Adventures actually beat you to it.
No, they didn't, because we started first.
Yeah, but they released theirs first.
Who cares? We started first.
So you didn't at all during development look at what they released and thought we can do this better. You're allowed to say that.
I believe we were aware of each other, and it was like two people in the room trying not to look at each other. Yeah,
it's like
that's kind of what was happening. Yeah, I don't really remember. Chris was more privy to the politics of that particular episode. But no, everything worked out well in the end, I think. But there was pretty much a 1-to-1 remake, like the King Quest 1-1. King Quest 1-1, that's good language. And
it does have some tying up.
Different.
Sorry, go on, Dan. Sorry.
I was just saying. So we weren't really in direct competition because it was really two different versions. They weren't the same product.
But
and they were free anyway, so who cares?
Yeah. Sure. And you're in obvious breach of copyright laws. But
I mean, this is basically
no, we weren't. No, because by that point, most certainly we had signed contracts with, again, I think it was Activision, whoever was owning all the IPs, and so we were given permission. We were given permission to do it.
Really?
And we were given retrospective permission, I think, for King's Quest 2, stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, really? Can we just sort of sidestep to that for a bit, because when because I was about to make the joke that this is just Fred harping on the fact that the Space Quest 2 remake came out after his Valhalla Strikes Back, and now he's still pissed about that. But actually, the whole thing about remakes, especially remakes of Sierra games, remakes or reinterpretations or such, back in 2012, when the big three Space Quest fan games came out, there was all this talk about, we better keep under the radar so Activision doesn't catch on to what we're doing. We've already seen what happened to Space Quest 7. We've already seen what happened to the Silver Lining. So you guys, it
didn't happen to us because Activision said, okay, you can do it, but we'll own it, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how did you guys finagle that, and why didn't... I mean, I know the reason why Space Quest 7, the fan game, didn't go that route, because they got a really shitty deal out of it. But you guys basically took the deal that was offered to the Space Quest 7 team, as in, you can make this, but we'll own it, and we can sell it, and we can do whatever we want with it.
Yeah. I have to be completely useful again and say I don't know I wasn't privy to all the goings-ons and the argy-bargy that went on behind the scenes. That was mostly Chris and whichever lawyer he was talking to at the time, because they did seem to have it wasn't an unpleasant situation really for us. For some reason, they decided that we could proceed.
I mean, something that we noted on Valhalla Strikes Back was that Space Quest 7 was cracked down upon, and the same didn't happen to us. And we kind of speculated that Space Quest 7 had a number in the title and could easily be misconceived to be an official extension of the series. Whereas we had Space Quest in the title, but we didn't have any number. I mean, technically it's probably like Space Quest 7 or 8 if you presume that 7 got lost somewhere along the way. But I think it was the lack of a numeral that helped us. And I mean, in your case, I guess it might have been that Google King's Quest 2 and 1 and 3 and what's more likely to turn up. It's probably going to be the official one. I mean, I don't think you would. Well, in the case of King's Quest 2 and players who were fixated on the narrative, I guess you could say you had the potential to hurt sales, but I wouldn't bring that argument forth.
I think you're giving their legal departments too much credit, actually. I don't think they think it through as much as this. I think it's completely on a whim, depending on what falls into their in tray, what other stuff they've got going on at the time. I don't think they think it through that well. If they did think it through that well, they wouldn't be in such... They wouldn't have fucked everything else up that they have done over the past 10 years, but maybe I'm being cynical.
Well, that's completely fine for the internet. You fit that in.
Okay.
No, I was going to say, from my point of view, I always felt like I was just writing. If I was writing fan fiction, no one would bat an eyelid. So I just thought of it as interactive fan fiction,
right?
Really, and so long as we weren't making any money from it, and if you consider that time is money, we're probably losing a lot of money. Then it was, so what, really.
Well, that falls under the labor of love banner, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, from my point of view, I was just still really feeling like I was learning how to put words together. So for me, it was just practice.
And this man is a teacher now, so I guess you learned.
Now I'm trying to get my kids to put letters together rather than start somewhere.
Okay, so moving back on track, King's Quest 3, you decided to do that because why not? And was it met with similar success? You say it's more of a one-to-one remake. There's
no. That was what Infamous Adventurers were doing. We're doing something like a. I probably went into that going, yeah, I could do the same as I did for King's Quest 2, and then getting into it and going, no, I can't, because King's Quest 3 was really the point where everything kind of started to become more narrative. orientated. I was finding that I wasn't able to change as much as I could before, because it did have a pretty strong narrative in it, and I just thought, well, probably the best I can do is take the moments, the main narrative points, and just emphasize them.
I think, King's Quest 3 is actually a very, very interesting game narratively. I mean, the game gets a bad rep, but it's only to do with the mechanics, if you think about it. I mean, the wizard running on a timer, the staircase, the mountainside, all that is shit. Basically put in there to extend the length of the gameplay. But the story is interesting, and I think, considering that Sierra had established some popularities with the King's Quest as a series where you played as noble knight, then King Graham, it's actually a bold move playing as this complete nobody named Gwydion, who, as it turns out, is King Graham's son.
Spoiler. 30, 40-year-old spoiler. But yeah, it is an interesting switch, going from I want to be a king, and now I am a king, and I'm throwing bridles at Snake. And
now I'm a slave, and I wonder what happens in that wizard's bedroom after sundown.
Yes, now I'm the shit-encrusted little slave person feeding chickens. What the fuck just happened?
I remember in the original King's Quest 3, they had a moment with it was optional that you found out. Gwydion finds out that he's actually Prince. Spoiler, yeah. But so we made it so that you had to have that moment. You had to have that moment of realization and things like that. So and also on the way when you're on the pirate ship, I just wanted to do Treasure Island. Just because.
I love your whimsical style of storytelling, and this is something I've known about you for years and years and years. And it's just that whenever you get an idea into your head, you just go, that would be so cool, and you work your way backwards, and you somehow make it work. It's absolutely phenomenal. I think you wrote a couple of fan fiction novels about Space Quest called Futures History that are absolutely amazing, and I still think they're amazing. And they were basically
because that is the sort of thing I have read in the years since and gone, I can see what I was trying to do. I just wish I hadn't done that.
That's basically a description of my life.
Yeah, that's I can latch onto that sense. But what those basically was, you know what? I just want to tell Space Quest 4 from the viewpoint of what happens in Space Quest 12. Just basically, what happens before Roger gets shoved into the time warp. Hey, let's do that, and just work your way backwards, and it all sort of
and end up with a completely different story. Well, Charles, you start on the story, and then it just turns into something completely different.
Yes. But it was awesome. So I love that whimsy that goes into it. I want to do Treasure Island. How do I work this into the story? You go. Okay. Fine. So what? Let's see. When King's Quest 3 was done, and now you're riding on the waves of having done King's Quest 2 and King's Quest 3 and making them absolutely beautiful and playable and narratively
billions of imaginary dollars.
Billions of Australian imaginary dollars.
Oh my goodness. I had a fleet of imaginary cars. I had imaginary property investments. Oh my goodness.
Australian customs breathing down your neck. No,
imaginary Australian customs.
Did I say? I didn't say cousins. I said customs.
Imaginary cousins. Yeah, all the imaginary incest that imaginarily rich people get up to. Okay, no one thought that was funny. That was probably too dark.
Oh, great.
Imaginary parties, but sadly not imaginary beverages.
Oh no! We need.
They were real. Yeah.
Needs more feet stumping in the old bathtub.
But I ain't spending any time on
it. Imaginary fun was had by.
I hope you do. I hope you do that for all your guests. Yeah.
Yes, we do. We do, especially the Australian ones. Play a lot of Australian clips.
I would say racism is our USP.
Yes.
Well, I mean, Gareth is basically your overlord, given that he is from the post-Brexit British Empire. So
That's right. I rule Britannia.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a
And
power
God
structure.
save the Queen while you're at it. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
But all in time for tea.
I think what I was trying to move on to, because I don't really know much about King's Quest 3, is...
Well, I have a question, if I may butt in and
yes, absolutely.
save your face here, because obviously when you approached King's Quest 3, you had so many loose threads from King's Quest 2. I mean, the Black Cloak Society and that hadn't been resolved. Did you motion to resolve all those plot points, or did you think that maybe you would get to do King's Quest 4 as well, and it would kind of become resolved there?
There was a thought to do that, and I was planning to do in the early days to do a distant sequel to King's Quest. That might have been shut down as per our previous conversation. But that's why I had this idea about how to resolve it all. It was with a very, very aged Graham. I'm not sure how that would have worked. He just hobbled his way around the place, I guess.
Well, the odd gentleman went out and did that anyway, except they lost that plot thread about the cloaks and everything. But yeah, they did. They got Christopher Lloyd in as King Graham.
Very good. I had no idea. There you go. That's why I reacted like that. But no, I have. You learned something new. I should pop up again. What were we going to say? What was the question?
The question was whether you actively went, right, I'm going to take all these loose plot threads about Black Cloak Society and whatnot that I came up with and resolve them in this next remake.
So I remember trying to move things forwards a little bit. I think there was a little sequence like in the end of the credits or something like that where I just had the main villain from the previous game pop up right at the end, which of course is nothing very special now because Marvel do it every movie. Pretty much. Silence.
Yeah, but I mean, at the time, it wasn't something that it's fairly common now to kind of like tie up everything. I mean, that's one of the few reasons I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is that starting with the first Iron Man movie, which is now 10 years old, there was kind of this movement to tie everything up and make sense of it and construct a universe. But it wasn't the norm at the time. I mean, if you look at the official King's Quest and Space Quest series, there isn't that much continuity in them. I mean, maybe Mordag being Manannan's brother is kind of the lone exception, and that actually made sense. There was a reason for Mordag's being there, but it wasn't something that was typically done. So I guess you were kind of ahead of your time with the construction of this King's Quest universe.
Ahead of my time, goodness gracious. So that would put me behind the times now, wouldn't it?
You have a very narrow window of about 1999 to 2003, Dan.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think, we blew that one, didn't we? No, I think around about King's Quest 3, we were starting to get itchy about making commercial stuff, and that's why Himalaya popped up as it did, and that's why Alamo came out, and that's why Majors will come out at some point in the 22nd century.
Well, that's still writing it.
That was a great segue into what I was trying to ask, although some questions did pop up about King's Quest 3, and I'm glad we sort of stayed on that topic for a bit. Having never, of course, played it, there's one thing I want to ask about King's Quest 3, and this is the only thing I know about King's Quest 3, other than if you type in "bye bye wizard," you actually get to leave the I was going to say castle. It's not a castle. You get to leave his house for 30 minutes.
It's a very modest castle.
It's there's bedpans. I mean, that's kind of fancy. Is that at one point apparently Alexander / Gwydion runs into his sister? It's Rosella, isn't it?
Yes, he does. I think that's very, very late in the game. He's arrived at Daventry with or without a pirate adventure, depending on which version you play. And she's being held captive by Princess being held captive by a dragon. Who would have thought?
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things I remember. Just particularly at the time, thinking, with in King Quest 2, with Valanice going, well, this is the only really decent female character, and I've got exactly half a scene to work with. How do I, make her a character? And it was the same with Rosella, trying to figure out how do I do something with her character. I've got nothing to work with, but yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, there's first of all, in the first couple of King's Quest games, I'm getting the sense that it is pretty much a sausage fest. If you don't have, you have your princess and towers and shit, but it is they're just plot devices rather than actual characters. And the reason I bring this up is recently on Twitter I saw a screenshot of a very disturbing look message in King's Quest 3. Where in the original, after you rescue your sister, and if you look at her, I think maybe Al Lowe must have crept in during the programming, because there's this look message
in the middle of the night.
Literally crept in. I think you should answer.
Yeah, because the look message is something like, "Oh my God, it's your sister. She's beautiful, and what a body!" It's like, okay,
I think you like it.
So I was just
nothing. Luke kissed Leia, and we won't go on about what Cersei and Jaime have been up to in Game of Thrones. I mean, come on.
All right. Well, I was just. Well, talk about good timing. So I kind of wanted to maybe poke into, and let's not get too deep into this.
Let's get into the incest.
Yeah, exactly. Because saying that you had very short scenes to work in female characters, and in the original they're just objects, and now you've got this incestuous undertone going. Did you at all explore this in the remake, or should we just quickly move on to the next topic?
I don't remember. No, I don't think I would have. I had no idea about that particular comment from Allo, alleged comment from Allo. But I think I was more focused on thinking, Rosella's a really important character coming up. How do I actually give her something to do or say?
Okay, so how did you actually give her something to do or say, except for just being rescued?
I just made her talk the whole time when they were walking back to the castle. All I could do.
Hey, works. But giving a character a voice is, one of the first steps towards making them a relatable character.
Giving women a voice goes a long way towards equal standing.
Actually, that is probably a good question with regards
very
to
topical. Very topical. Yeah.
Topical humor.
With regards to both King's Quest 2 and 3, what did you do to sort of combat the sausage fest quality of the original games?
I think one of the things I remember with Hagatha, the witch in King's Quest 2, she is a principal villain, so that just, which she wasn't in the original, just sort of there. So she's like the main antagonist until you get to the end of the game. So that was one. And I think I tried to put Valanice in there in little flashbacks, little cutscenes and things, and then got my sister to sing a song at the end of the game. Don't know how I managed that. Yeah, and then what else? And for King's Quest 3, I don't remember. It wasn't a lot of you could do. I think Medusa in King's Quest 3 was given a bit more to do. I think I expanded that a bit and gave her a bit more of a quest line. I think I gave her a redemption story, whereas somebody in the original you just hold up a mirror and she turns into stone, as per the old myth. I think is a way to save her and make her normal again. Stuff like that. Yes, I think the bar wench. was kind of I think I just gave her lots of lines.
Don't laugh. That's the official job description.
Oh, sorry. I forget. Medieval times is different times.
The Bar Wenches Union will come after you lot now.
No, that probably wasn't the most egalitarian way of describing that character. But yeah, Yeah, she was fun to write. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of female characters in there, was there? Oh well.
Well, it was medieval times, I guess. So.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. I think, especially at the time, I wasn't really thinking about role of males and females, but that's really come to the fore more recently. Certainly in recent years, I've thought a lot more about it, and I've been more conscious of the way I handle female characters, and trying to get away from the old archetypes associated and the things that we've got used to growing up.
Can we have a bit in Mage's Initiation where a princess is holding a dragon captive? That was a very polite laugh.
But by turning the stereotype on its head, are you not indeed just perpetuating the stereotype?
Probably. I don't know.
I think the only way to challenge a stereotype is to put on its head. Yeah, why not? Sure.
But okay, moving on to you mentioned Alamo and the upcoming game. So you were after the successes. I mean, it's fair to call them successes of King's Quest 2 and 3. Still lauded as some of the best fan games ever produced.
Yes.
But only some
I
of
will
them.
accept that.
Good. Yep. Yes. I'm handing you dollar bills under the table.
Imaginary dollar bills.
Imaginary. Monopoly. Australian dollars.
Schultz, are you trying to ask Dan if he remembers the Alamo?
Wait, it was like a license to print money.
I'm trying to get into the ways of writing, making a remake versus making original content all of a sudden. Because you said
Sorry, I was just going to say that was a completely different experience because Brittany and Chris got their head. Oh, it was Brittany's brainchild. She wanted to do a game based on her the state that she lives in, Arizona. If you just take the letters of Arizona and look at them backwards, it becomes Anazira. So it's really just a parody of where she is and historical parody. It was an interesting thing because neither Chris or Britt had played Freddy Farkas, and I had. So it's like I was like, you know, this has been done. Yeah. Anyway.
The entire development is just going, yeah, we can't put that in. It's already been done.
So basically a remake of a game that no one from the team apart from you had played.
That's right. So I was very conscious of that. And having to think about, they basically just wrote notes of where they wanted the story to go and said, okay, here, Dan, what can you do? And I just had to write specific stuff. And it was a weird process because I was starting with their design, but as I was going through, I was adding more and more of my stuff in there, and it sort of became more of my story, if that makes sense. That's not me trying to claim ownership over it because it was very much a collaborative effort with the three of us putting stuff in. But it's really hard to work out where the original design was and where I came in. It all just gets a bit fuzzy and blurred, and yeah, it's just part of the collaborative process, I guess. And some of the most fun parts of game design when all three of us were in a room trying to just work out stuff and banging our heads against the wall and just trying. Well, how do we solve that problem and what do we do for this bit and how the most interesting part of that was. Okay, Dan, you need to create a puzzle. We can't have any new characters. You can't have any new inventory. You can't have any new dialogue, but we need a new puzzle. Go.
All right. I was with you up until you can't have any new dialogue. So it's just, okay. Is he going to use fucking sign language or something?
I think I might be misremembering. I think because Chris was being the voice of Alamo, I could use Al's voice, but everything else had to be assets that were already in the game. So that was interesting.
Wow. Yeah, because the question I was trying to ask very, very poorly. I'm sorry. Was going from having an established game that you could always look back to, an established story really of King's Quest 2 and 3, and just making it better. Now you're working with an original story that, as you just said, was sort of half in place, but you were completely open to changing it and running it in your direction. And so when do you consider, when you're working on an original story, where do you sort of say, okay, we're done now, this is the final story, and this is what we're going to put in?
That's when, at the time, Chris and Britt would say, "No, Daniel, you can't touch it anymore," and they take it away from me.
Oh, so you're one of those. That's the.
I can't let it go. I always have to change things.
This is the George Lucas.
Trolls probably knows this. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, which means I never really get anything done. So you have to take it away from me and say, "Right, you're done, Dan." That's it.
And what comes out is still brilliant. Don't get me wrong. Wasn't it George Lucas who said that good movies are never finished; they're just abandoned? It might have been Francis Ford Coppola.
And re-released, and the extra super special edition. Yeah.
Yeah, it might not have been George Lucas because he certainly doesn't adhere to it.
No, he said it.
Oh, he did. Yeah, and then
he was quoting somebody, but he said it.
And then he sobered up and went, "No, wait, I can." Actually, he may have gotten drunk and gone, "Oh, wait, I can go back. I can fix this." And he was very drunk at the time.
Now,
yeah.
It was interesting because I just thought of something random during Alamo. It was split into distinct chapters, and by the last one, just before the last one, all through the game, I had this sort of dialogue between Al and the narrator. So it was kind of a lot of breaking the fourth wall. And the Al and the narrator would sort of argue with each other. And the narrator did not want to narrate the story, basically. That was how I was approaching it. I don't know if that was something coming from me. Like, I'm pretty sure I wanted to write it at the time. So it got to a head where just before the final chapter, I just did the Gollum scene with, Al telling the narrator, "Go away, I don't need you anymore." And they just did that, Smeagol Gollum argument, and Al narrates the rest of the story by himself. And I thought, you know what, I should have done that from the start.
Well, that's actually interesting because one of the things I was harping about when I played Space Quest 6 on my YouTube channel was that all of a sudden Roger and the narrator are now conversing, and it doesn't seem like the narrator's this omnipotent figure who's, the stopping point between the player and the main character. And I thought that was a weird shift in tone, and most of the YouTube commenters just went, "Shut up and enjoy the game." I quite enjoy the fact that you took that concept and didn't just sort of, like Space Quest 6 doesn't even try to explain why Roger can suddenly hear a voice in his head. You just went all out with it. And I like the balls out approach of just going, all right, if Al can hear the narrator's voice in his head, why should they be friends? Why should... Right. Yeah.
And the other thing I remember from Alamo was because descriptors are not my favorite form of writing. By a long shot. Dialogue I'm quite comfortable with, and general scenes and stuff like that, but descriptors drive me batty. So in the desert, you've got rocks and trees, and specifically in that game, cacti and stars, and every single screen almost, and you've got to have different descriptors for each. It's like, I think some of the strangest writing I've ever done was having to describe rocks. At one point, I just went, I'll just do a musical. There's a rock over here, and a rock over there. There's a rock far and near, and a rock light and fair. There are lots of little rocks in the air, everywhere. It's a rocky kind of day.
Applause.
That's where it got to. That's where it got to.
I mean, if I was working on that game, it would be, look, Cactus, it's another spiny cunt. What do you want?
That is such a perfect way as we progress towards the end of this episode, because we've been here for a good hour already. That would be a perfect way to end the episode, but I know that Trolls has one final question that he wants to get out, so get it out, Trolls.
Phrasing, please, if you would.
No. Audio only, it's fine.
Okay, get it out and then ask the question.
All right. Yes, I have flipped it out, and
lands on the table.
And here is my meaty question.
Is it a long question? No.
Well, it is certainly a medical conundrum.
Withdraw.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The question is, of course, an excuse for you to plug what is going on with your current project. Yes. Because you mentioned it briefly before, and just wanted to give you a chance to talk about that game that you have been working on and are currently novelizing and all of that stuff. So what is Mage's Initiation all about?
Thank you for the opportunity to plug Mage's Initiation, Reign of the Elements. Mage's Initiation, Reign of the Elements. I'm very prepared for this, as you can see. Is a story about a young initiate who wants to become a mage and has been training for the last 10 years to do so, and is now finally able to achieve his goal if he can pass 3 trials. Sounds familiar? And that is the nutshell of the story. However, as he progresses through this story, he will find that not everything is as it appears to be, and there are darker things afoot that he must uncover and ultimately defeat. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, that's the nutshell. And as to when it's released, I know it's pretty much done. We're getting all the it's down to all the voice acting, lip syncing part of the game, and so hopefully, as I said, you'll see it at some point this century. If you have access to cryogenic suspension, then I would use that, because that would guarantee your ability to play.
I was just gonna say you did a successful Kickstarter of it, and what were you involved in the Kickstarter? Were there some rewards of let's say saucy pictures of Australian writing gentlemen offered as stretch goals, or
phrasing?
The stretch goals. I'll give you an opportunity to.
I think you like it.
I have no recollection of the Kickstarter except for the numbers just going up and up and up, and it was extremely humbling, all the support that we got. The money has been spent. I mean, well spent, and and we will get the game done as soon as we can. You got to understand, right now it is a team of pretty much one. It is now just basically Chris. Everyone else has done their bit, and he's just he's doing it alone.
Right, so the script has been taken away from you forcibly.
Absolutely. That was definitely another example of I'm not allowed to write another single word. That's correct. Yes, that's absolutely correct. It's really I don't like testing the game, because I just find something I want to change, and now it's way too late. It's past late. It's
Right. Yeah. Cool. So look forward to the thing that is definitely not Quest for Glory. It is Mage's Initiation.
We've had this conversation. I
do recall.
I'd say Chris certainly in particular is a big fan of Quest for Glory, so there was definitely an aspect of that in there. There's definitely King's Quest in there, obviously, with everything I've written for it. And probably at the time I wrote it, there was probably a lot of Harry Potter going on in my head, which is why you've got a lot of wizards running around. But I hope it doesn't feel like that either. I think it's really an amalgamation of lots of different things. I hope that it will come out. I'll just leave it. I hope it will come out, and when it does, I hope people enjoy it. Demand another 5 sequels, because this has only taken. I wrote the first draft in 2008. I'm sure I have many. That's been a decade. I'm sure I have many decades left within me.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, yes. It sounds like a license to print money. So if people want to find out more about the game or find out more about you online, where can they go, Dan? What's your social media and everything?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I believe if you were to Google Himalaya Studios, you would find all sorts of interesting things there.
Well, we'll put all those links up on the website.
Right. I tried to get Dan into Twitter a number of years ago, and it didn't quite take. So actually, Dan's social media presence is virtually non-existent, really.
I think the last
good for your
hour has
mental
proven the less. The last hour has proven the less I say in public, the better.
Oh, I always enjoy your company,
Quote
Dan.
the writer.
Well, thank you, Dan. Unfortunately, we say far too much in public. You can find all of that at backseatdesigners.com. You can also find us on Twitter at BSDesigners. We have a Facebook group. Just put in the little searchy thing, Backseat Designers. You know how Facebook works, at least by now. And to be honest, if you're still listening to us after all of this, you probably know all of that anyway. We have a Patreon. If for whatever reason you think that this is worth money, good luck to you. But we do have a Patreon where we also put some of the outtakes. Yes, this isn't everything we record. This is how... This is the best stuff. And then there's outtakes.
Just getting the primo shit.
Yeah. Process that for a second. And we will... I think I've plugged everything that I need to plug. It is now 9:20 in the morning. I have now got a stinking cold. I have had most of this episode on mute so that you haven't had to listen to my mucus. So say goodbye, Fred.
Goodbye.
And I'd just like to say, if you ever come to the Adelaide Hills, I completely recommend the Howard Vineyards, which is about 5 minutes up from where I live. Half a bottle in, it's just really good.
Takes that cold away like you wouldn't believe.
I was going to say I'm going to go for Lemsip rather than a couple of bottles of wine, but I think by the end of the day I might have to use both.
There is a Californian champagne by Paul Masson.
They sell Paul Masson in the off-license downstairs. I think I might go and get a bottle.
It's fermented in the bottle.
And say goodbye, trolls.
Goodbye.
And we will see you next week.
No more for today.